A man trapped in filth for 17 days, eaten alive by maggots, covered in bugs, left begging for death in ancient Persia. Guards gagged from the smell, but the king wanted everyone to see. How could a torture get so extreme, and who even survived to tell these stories? You won't believe the truth behind these prisoners' lives. Let's start with number 10. Balthazar Gerard was skinned alive and his flesh peeled off. This isn't just one of the worst deaths in history, it's a real-life nightmare that shocked an entire country. Imagine standing in the middle of a city, naked, surrounded by hundreds of people waiting to watch you suffer. That's what happened to Balthazar Gerard in 1584. He killed William the Silent, the leader of Dutch independence, and the Dutch made sure no one ever forgot what came next. They didn't just want him dead, they wanted everyone to feel his pain. After days of public beatings, Gerard was dragged to the city square and chained to a pole. People spit on him and threw garbage. Then the executioners came out with special knives, long, thin, perfect for slicing off skin. They started at his feet and legs, peeling strips of flesh while he was still awake. Blood gushed everywhere. Witnesses say he tried to pass out, but guards forced him awake with ice water. They cut his arms, his chest, even his face. He screamed until he couldn't scream anymore. And the torture didn't stop. They took pieces of his skin, stuck them on sticks, and marched them around town like trophies. His skin was nailed to city gates as a warning to anyone thinking about murder or rebellion. Court records say he survived for hours, some say up to 4 hours, after they started peeling his skin. Some people in the crowd cheered, but others got sick and ran away. The punishment was so extreme that even years later, Dutch parents would scare their kids by saying, "You want to end up like Gerard?" This wasn't just about one man. It was about making an example so big that nobody would ever try anything like that again. And if you think that's horrific, wait until you hear about a man who suffered for 17 days, all because of hungry insects. Number 9. Mithridates was trapped in filth and slowly eaten by maggots. This is one of the most disgusting ways a human ever died. Mithridates was a Persian soldier who got on the wrong side of the king. For his punishment, they stuck him between 2 wooden boats, just his arms, legs, and head poking out. He couldn't move. He couldn't get away. Guards forced milk and honey into his mouth until he got diarrhea. They also covered his body, face, and private parts with honey. Why? To make sure every bug in the area found him. Flies, ants, maggots, they all showed up, crawling all over him, biting, laying eggs. Some insects even crawled inside open sores and wounds. He had to sit in his own filth, totally helpless. The pain was nonstop. Skin started rotting off. The stench was so bad that even the guards gagged. Still, Mithridates couldn't die right away. He lasted 17 days. 17 days of bugs eating him alive, inside and out. Ancient records say by the end, his body was more bug than flesh. When they pulled the boats apart, there wasn't much left. Just bones, blackened skin, and a pile of living maggots. That was the Persian king's warning to everyone. Betray me, and this could be you. The next story is about someone being cut in half, and he stays awake while it happens. This is as raw as it gets. Number 8. They sliced a man in half from groin to skull while he screamed. If you think dying fast is bad, try being cut in half while you're still awake. This torture method is simple and cruel. The victim is hung upside down by his feet, naked, with his legs spread apart. The executioners take a huge saw and start cutting, right between the legs. They go slow on purpose. Because you're upside down, all the blood stays in your head, which keeps you alive longer. Some people stayed conscious for 3 or 4 minutes while the saw ripped up through their pelvis, stomach, and even up toward the chest. You can hear bones crack, organs split open, and blood splash on the ground. People in the crowd are shocked. Some can't look away, others throw up. This wasn't rare. This torture happened in places like ancient Rome, the Ottoman Empire, and even China. They used it for traitors, rebels, or just to scare people. In one case, the Roman Emperor Caligula ordered dozens of men to be sawn in half just because he was in a bad mood. Records from Persia tell of public sawings where the crowd would cheer or bet on how long the victim would stay alive. Nobody survives. Some are cut all the way up to the chest, some only to the belly. But every single one dies screaming. The next torture is about being burned alive inside a metal statue shaped like a bull. And this wasn't a one-time thing. It happened to entire families, in front of crowds. If you're enjoying this story, give us hype for this video right now. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like so this series reaches every explorer out there. The next twist in this story is seconds away, and trust me, you'll want to be here when it drops. Number 7. Saint Eustace and his family were roasted alive in a bronze bull. This torture was basically slow cooking a human, and it was used to make an example out of anyone who crossed the wrong people. The bronze bull looked like a statue, but it was hollow inside. They shoved the victim inside, locked the door, and then lit a fire underneath. You couldn't escape, and the heat kept rising. Saint Eustace was a Roman general who became Christian, which the emperor hated. As punishment, he and his whole family, his wife and 2 kids, were thrown inside the bull together. The fire burned for hours. The metal got so hot, it roasted them alive, skin melting, hair burning, muscles turning to mush. There was nowhere to hide. If you tried to move, you hit the burning sides. You could hear them screaming, but the bull was designed to turn their cries into animal sounds, so the crowd outside just heard roaring. This was a public show. Roman crowds actually gathered to watch and listen. Some stories say they even cooked food over the same fire. The bodies inside were left until they were nothing but charred bones. It happened to many others too, not just Eustace. The bull was used in ancient Greece, Sicily, and Rome. In some cases, rulers forced the inventor of the device, Parios, to be the first person roasted inside his own creation. Next, a woman whose bones were shattered, limb by limb, until there was almost nothing left but broken pieces. And she lived through most of it. Number 6. Margaretha Peters' limbs were shattered until bones stuck through skin. Margaretha Peters' name doesn't come up in most history books, but what she went through is one of the harshest punishments ever recorded. In 1823, in Switzerland, she led a small religious group some saw as a cult. Authorities called her dangerous and wanted her gone for good. Her sentence? The breaking wheel. They tied Margaretha spread eagle onto a giant wooden wheel, legs and arms pulled tight between the spokes. In public, with a huge crowd watching, the executioner picked up a heavy iron bar and started smashing. He struck each limb over and over, first the arms, then the legs, breaking bones one after another. With every hit, the bones split and sometimes burst right through her skin. Blood spattered everywhere. Some people in the front rows fainted from the sight and the noise of bone crunching. But they didn't stop there. The wheel was spun and more bones got smashed. The idea was to keep her alive as long as possible so everyone could watch her suffer. Sometimes victims lasted for hours or even days. Margaretha survived for several hours before she finally died of shock and blood loss. After she died, her broken body was left on the wheel for days as a warning. By the end, there was almost nothing left that wasn't shattered. Let's move more targeted and cruel. It's about a Persian queen who had her breasts torn off in public while she was still alive, and everyone was forced to watch. Number 5. A Persian queen had her breasts torn off with hot iron claws. This torture was made to destroy not just a person, but their dignity. The Persian queen's name was Parysatis, and her crime was getting caught up in a deadly royal drama in ancient Persia. When the king wanted to make an example of her, he chose a method made to horrify everyone. She was stripped naked in front of a crowd. Executioners heated iron claws until they were red hot, then clamped them over her breasts. The metal burned and bit at the same time. The claws were yanked, ripping flesh straight from her chest. Blood poured everywhere. Parysatis screamed and passed out, but the torture didn't stop. They revived her with cold water and did it again, ripping and tearing until there was nothing left but raw muscle and bone. Records from ancient historians say that sometimes this punishment was saved for women accused of adultery or treason. The torture often took more than an hour, and most victims died from blood loss or shock. If they didn't, infection finished them within days. The public was forced to watch. Guards threatened anyone who looked away or tried to help. Some people in the crowd fainted, others cried, but many watched in horror because that's what the king wanted, to make sure nobody ever thought about betraying him. And the torture doesn't stop here. The next tells the story of a man whose skin was peeled off and nailed up for all to see, sending a message no one could ignore. Number 4. Pierre Bazile's skin was peeled off and nailed up for all to see. Pierre Bazile was a knight in France, and in 1199 he fired an arrow that killed King Richard the Lionheart. He probably thought he'd get a quick death for that. He was wrong. The king's men wanted revenge. They grabbed Bazile, dragged him out in front of a huge crowd, and chained him up. No mercy. The executioners started by cutting around his wrists and ankles, then slicing his skin loose from muscle, peeling it away in strips while he was alive. Blood poured out. Bazile screamed and twisted, but there was nowhere to go. Guards kept him awake by dumping cold water on him whenever he fainted. When they finished, he was still breathing, barely. They nailed pieces of his skin to the castle gates and city walls as a warning. Anyone walking by saw raw, bloody strips of human flesh pinned up for days right next to his bones. It was all public. Hundreds of people saw it, some cheering, some turning away, but everyone remembered. Bazile's body was finally chopped up and tossed away, but his skin stayed up until it rotted off. Local stories say his ghost still haunts the spot. Nobody wanted to go near those gates for years. If you think that's bad, wait until you hear about what happened to a priest whose mouth was torn open from the inside, using a torture tool built to destroy from within. Number 3. A priest's mouth was torn apart by a metal pear cranked open. This torture method was about as personal and humiliating as it gets. The victim this time was a priest accused of heresy, going against the church. Instead of a simple execution, they chose something far more extreme, the pear of anguish. They dragged the priest into a dungeon, tied him to a chair, and forced a metal device shaped like a pear into his mouth. The pear had 4 sharp metal petals. Once inside, the executioner slowly turned a screw at the top. As it turned, the petals opened wide, tearing apart the jaw, breaking teeth, and ripping the inside of the cheeks and throat. Blood poured out. Screaming just made it worse because the device would open even further if he moved his mouth. Historical records show this wasn't rare. The pear of anguish was used on priests, women accused of witchcraft, and anyone suspected of lying to the authorities. Sometimes the device was shoved into other parts of the body as punishment for different crimes. But mouth torture was the most public and brutal. Victims often passed out from pain or choked on their own blood. Sometimes the jaw would shatter completely, leaving the face disfigured forever. The priest in this story was left alive, but never spoke again. Afterward, the broken pear was hung on the church door as a warning. And just when you think it can't get worse, imagine being tortured in public, having your tongue cut out, and then your whole body hacked to pieces. That's the next true story. Number 2. Jan Jasenius had his tongue cut out and his body butchered. Jan Jasenius was a famous doctor and political leader in Prague, but in 1621 he got caught leading a rebellion against the Habsburgs. The punishment? The authorities wanted everyone to know what happens to rebels and made sure nobody could ever hear his voice again. First, soldiers grabbed Jasenius in front of a huge crowd in the town square. They yanked his mouth open and used big iron tongs to grab his tongue. Then, with one hard pull, they sliced it out at the root. Blood gushed everywhere. Jasenius couldn't scream, just gurgle and choke. Some people in the crowd fainted, others cheered. but nobody forgot what they saw. But the torture wasn't over. The executioner dragged Gesenius to a wooden scaffold and started hacking off chunks of his flesh, one piece at a time. He was alive for most of it. They chopped off his hands, his arms, his legs. Some witnesses said the man looked straight at the crowd the whole time, face covered in blood, never looking away. Finally, they beheaded him and stuck his head on a spike for everyone to see. Pieces of his body were nailed to city gates as a warning: rebel, and you'll be silenced and butchered in public. As raw as that was, the next story is somehow even more relentless. A man slowly crushed by stones, his chest exploding as the crowd watched, minute by minute. Number 1. Giles Corey's body. Exploded as stones crushed him inch by inch. This torture didn't use fire or blades, just pure heavy weight. Giles Corey was an old farmer in Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692. He was accused of witchcraft, but instead of confessing or denying it, he stayed silent. The court wanted him to talk. Their answer? Pressing. They laid Corey flat on his back in a pit. They put a wooden board on his chest. Then, one by one, they started piling huge, heavy stones on top. Each time he refused to speak, they added more weight. The crowd watched as Corey's body got flatter and flatter, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging out. He didn't beg. He didn't scream. The sheriff kept asking, "Are you ready to confess?" Corey just said, "More weight." After 2 days, the pressure crushed his ribs, his bones snapped, and finally his chest exploded, blood and guts pouring out. He was 81 years old. Historians say it took over 350 pounds of stone to finally kill him. Some records claim his tongue popped out of his mouth and the sheriff pushed it back in with a stick. This torture was public. The whole town saw it. Giles Corey's death was so horrifying, they never used pressing again in America. His last words are still famous today. That's how far people would go to force someone to confess, crushing a man until his body exploded just to set an example. If you want more stories like these, just ask. I can dig even